Okay. City Clerk, I'm going to call the meeting to order.
Right.
And we should probably do you think we should do the roll call first?
Yes.
Let's
Yes,
do
we
that, and then
should.
we'll do the land acknowledgement.
We are live, everyone. I just got a text saying we're live, so.
Okay.
Okay, so I have Councillor Lowe, Councillor Killen, Councillor Stewart, Councillor Sullivan, the Mayor, Councillor Rodwan, Councillor Harris, Councillor Ogden, Councillor Hickey. Councillor Norton, are you on?
I am. Yep. I'm there. I'm not sure if you can see me coming quick.
Let me just see. Okay, thank you. Yep. I think that's everyone, Your Worship.
We have everyone? Okay, so we'll call the meeting to order, and we'll start it off with a land acknowledgement, which will be read tonight by the deputy. So over to you, Deputy.
Thank you, Your Worship. The land on which the city of St. John, or Manequist, is situated is the traditional territory of the Wolastoqiyik. The Wolastoqiyik, along with their indigenous neighbors, the Mi'kmaq and Pescatamaquoddy, signed peace and friendship treaties with the British Crown in the 1700s that protected their rights to lands and resources. Let us pause and reflect.
Okay, thank you. Tonight, there will not be a national anthem. The equipment wasn't working well. But before we get started with the meeting, I do have a statement that I would like to read on behalf of council. So the City of St. John stands with residents in their concerns and outrage over the environmental, safety, and public health crisis caused by the toxic fire at American Iron and Metal, or AIM. The land on which AIM operates is not city land, nor do we have any jurisdiction over regulating AIM operations, yet our residents and businesses are the ones suffering the consequences, the full severity of which we may only learn in months or maybe years to come. In the early morning of September 14th, many partners in our city came together, like they always do in a crisis, and I want to thank our first responders, our emergency workers, JD Irving Oil Limited, and Port of St. John, who worked around the clock, sharing their expertise and their resources to protect residents and get the fire under control and return our air quality to normal levels. The province of New Brunswick has committed to institute a thorough investigation to understand how the incident happened. We are also calling on the province to undertake a full and independent audit of AIM's compliance with their approval to operate that is issued by the province's Minister of the Environment and Local Government. Furthermore, we request that the outcomes of the audit be made available to our entire community and the general public, those of us who have been so negatively impacted by this public health and environmental disaster. Residents of St. John deserve answers around oversight, operational compliance, environmental impacts, and public health. Enough is enough. For several years now, the city has strongly raised concerns with respect to AIM operations and the risk it poses to our community. Its location is unacceptable and incompatible with our residential communities on both sides of the harbor, our tourist economy, and our cruise industry, and our work to attract private investment and beautify our waterfront and create housing for our growing population. AIM is a black eye on our community, and we cannot accept anything less than swift and strong action from those who control its ability to operate. We are pleased with the Premier's promise to move with speed in conducting the investigation, including clear deadlines for AIM to uphold and for the Department of the Environment and Local Government to enforce. We also look forward to hearing from the federal government, who owns the land on which AIM operates. The residents and businesses of St. John must be respected and protected going forward. Anything less is unacceptable. I will acknowledge that at 5:30 this evening, the Premier Higgs's office did issue a release, and in that we understand, and I haven't read the whole thing, but there will be a joint task force that will be appointed, and we would applaud any of actions that would look to this operation and the serious impacts on business and residents that has complicated our lives over this weekend. So, as I said, that release only came out at 5:30 this evening. I haven't fully read it yet, so it was good to hear that. All right, City Clerk, next item, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Next on the agenda is item 2.1, approval of September the 5th minutes.
September 5th minutes, Councillor Radwan and the deputy on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item.
Next is the approval of the agenda, and there are a number of items that need to be added. First one is would become 16.1. It's a motion submitted by Councillor Norton with respect to AIM. 16.2, a Freedom of the City Proclamation. 16.3, an update regarding public safety by Councillor Hickey.
Okay. I'll need approval of the agenda. Motion to approve the agenda. Councillor Lowe and Councillor Ogden on the question.
Your Worship, just on the question there, just a quick one. We just received a letter specific to AIM from Uptown St. John, the BIA. I was just hoping I can circulate that and then we could include it in the agenda. It just came in like a little while ago, so it wasn't able to get on faster, but I think it's timely given tonight's conversations.
Who's it addressed to?
To Mayor and Council.
Well, I haven't read the letter yet, so I guess we can put it on then. I don't know. You know what? Well, City Clerk?
It can be added, Your Worship. There also are two items from, yep, there's also two items from Committee of the Whole.
Okay.
So the Uptown St. John letter will become 16.4, and then 16.5 would be Building Safer Community Fund, recommendation from Committee of the Whole. And the next would be, so that's 17.1.
17.1 is Building Safer Community?
Yep.
Yep.
And 17.2 would be Release of Positive Covenant at 279 Duke Street.
Duke Street, okay. Okay, Councillor Radwan, you had a question on the agenda?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to make sure that Jonathan Taylor could take a look at the letter before it's actually added. Did he get a copy of it, just to make sure it's something that he would normally add? Probably is.
John's gotten a copy, Lisa's gotten a copy, I've gotten a copy, as well as Your Worship, you've gotten a copy. It was only sent at 4:51, so we were in the middle of
Councillor,
we already enclosed, and it was approved by the board, which includes me and Commissioner Fogan. So if you take our word, it's in good shape and in keeping with council's perspective on this issue.
All right, thank you. All right, so we have everything on the agenda there, City Clerk. So I'll call the question for approval of the agenda. We already did that, didn't I? We've got a mover and a seconder on it. I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item, City Clerk.
Next item is disclosures of conflict of interest, if we have any.
We do. Councillor Sullivan, over to you.
Hey, Your Worship, I think it's 17.1.
17.1, thank you. Okay, only seeing Councillor Sullivan. On to the next item, please, City Clerk.
Next item is the consent agenda.
Okay, Deputy, over to you for the consent agenda.
Thank you, Your Worship. Your Worship, I would move 5.1 and 5.2, please.
Can I get a seconder on that? Councillor Sullivan, on the question. Councillor Radwan, you're up first.
Yeah, I'd like to pull 5.1, Mayor.
Okay, City Clerk, for discussion.
I'm going to be asking if we can change some of the wording on part of it, so I think I need to pull it.
Okay, so 5.1, City Clerk, where will that go?
Your Worship, that becomes 14.1 on the agenda.
14.1. Okay. And Councillor Stewart? You have your light on, Councillor Stewart? No? Okay.
Yeah, I'll wait, your worship. Now that we're pulling that, I'll talk about it when it comes up there.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so we just have 5, I guess, city deputy, do you want to amend your motion?
Certainly, your worship. I would move 5.1.
5.2.
I would move
5.1.
5.2. I'm sorry.
Right, sorry. Who's my seconder on that? Councillor Sullivan or Councillor Stewart? Okay, are we good there? So, all right, on the question on the consent agenda, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Okay. Next item, city clerk. Uh-oh.
Next is item 6, members' comments.
Members' comments. Okay, hang on for a second here. I'm going to need my, all right, members' comments. Hold on, you just have to get, so members' comments, as you all know, is a speed round. Usually I just have a look at your monitors, at your mics, because you can all see those. So I'll ask you to stick to your 2 minutes. You won't be able to see, you don't have a mic. So Councillor Redwan, you're up first.
Thank you, Mayor. Few things coming up I just wanted to make sure everybody knew about. Tree Canada is actually doing some tree planting September the 20th at 3 o'clock in Glen Falls. As staff know, I've been pushing to get some more trees, especially in Glen Falls, McAllister Drive, Rossi Avenue area. So this is good news. It's a good start. And Irving Oil Fieldhouse Community Day is coming up on the 23rd of September from 9 until 3 p.m. So that's a free event for people to go to. And there's actually going to be a ball tournament on September the 30th, starting at 11:30 in Forest Hills. This is being put on by Threshold House. And although we'll say that we don't totally align in all of our values, one big value we do align on, because it's a Christian group, right, is rehabilitation for our community. So they basically are getting a whole bunch of people that have gone through struggling through addictions that have recovered, getting together for a ball tournament, and I'm a big fan of doing things like that. It sounds like it's going to be a great event. So that's in Forest Hills.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hickey, over to you.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. 3 quick things. Today is Big Brothers and Big Sisters Community Day, so let's celebrate them and all the work that they do in our community. Shout out to you, Your Worship, for having great conversation with them today, with our representatives locally from Big Brothers Big Sisters, and celebrating their work. Also, this past week we celebrated the launch of United Way's campaign, annual campaign, and the recognition of their new campaign chair for the year, Craig Esterbrooks. So congratulations to Craig, and eager to see them beat their record of $1.7 million raised in the community set last year. And of course, this week is Municipalities Week, so let's all give ourselves a little pat on the back for being great municipal representatives.
Thank you, Councillor. I will add to that I was dropped off this little, I don't know, there's some fading in and out here, little bag of goodies from St. John Boys and Girls Club, and really it's for council. It's a little bag
Big
of
Brothers,
candy
Big
here.
Sisters.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Big Brothers, Big Sisters, yeah. Losing my mind. I was thinking about their, they have the big book sale, and they did another $3,000 more this year than they have done in the past. So they were just by today, and they wanted to bring their thanks to the city of St. John for all their support. And I thought, oh, I'll put those little candies out at everybody's little spot tonight. But
I just can't believe they gave a dietitian a bag full of candy. But anyway.
I'm getting carrots next year. I've already asked for them, Councillor. All right, thanks, team. Okay, next item, City Clerk.
Next, we have a number of proclamations. So the first one on the agenda is 7.1. It's for Rail Safety Week, September 18th to 24th.
Okay. Whereas it's in the public's interest to raise citizens' awareness of the dangers of ignoring safety warnings at level crossings and trespassing on rail property to reduce avoidable deaths, injuries, and damage caused by incidents involving trains and citizens. And whereas every year more than 2,100 North Americans are killed or seriously injured because of unsafe behavior around tracks and trains. Every one of these incidents and deaths are preventable. By looking out for each other and working together, we can help keep our communities safe and prevent injuries and fatalities on or near railway property. And whereas safety is a core value at CN, and we continue to take all necessary steps to protect our employees, communities, customers, vendors, and partners with the objective of reducing rail-related injuries and fatalities to zero, as we safely serve our customers and keep the economy moving, we remain committed in our efforts to educate the public on rail safety. And whereas Operation Lifesaver is a public-private partnership whose aim is to work with the public, rail industry, governments, police services, media, and others to raise rail safety awareness, to help prevent accidents and injuries at rail crossings in your community, and to ensure everyone's safety on and around railroad infrastructure year-round. And whereas rail safety is a shared responsibility, now therefore I, Mayor Donna Node Reardon of St. John, do hereby proclaim the week of September 18 to 24, 2023 as Rail Safety Week in the City of St. John. Next item, City Clerk.
Next is 7.2, Wrongful Conviction Day Proclamation.
Whereas Wrongful Conviction Day is designated as an annual international day to recognize the tremendous personal, social, and legal costs associated with wrongful criminal convictions. And whereas this day recognizes those persons who have been forced to endure the tremendous consequences brought by a wrongful criminal conviction, and whereas the purpose of this day is to inform and educate the broader international community on the causes, consequences, complications associated with wrongful criminal convictions. More information on the day can be found at wrongfulconvictionday.com. And whereas it is important to raise awareness in order to work toward the prevention of further wrongful convictions and to direct the public's attention to this issue and generate support and understanding. And whereas Wrongful Conviction Day was spearheaded by the Wrongful Conviction Day Committee, and now many organizations are leading events in its honor. The committee is committed to raising awareness and to advocating against wrongful convictions globally. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Donna Node Reardon of St. John, do hereby declare October the 2nd as Wrongful Conviction Day in the City of St. John. Next item, City Clerk.
Next is 7.3, National Forest Week Proclamation.
Whereas Canada's forests are a valuable, renewable resource that contribute to our economy and the livelihood of our communities. And whereas Canada's forests play a crucial role in maintaining healthy ecosystems, clean air and water, and wildlife habitat, whilst being an important aspect of climate change mitigation efforts. And whereas the City of St. John and its citizens rely on the surrounding forest for livelihood, health, and recreation, and whereas this annual one-week campaign with the theme of Canada's forests, supporting biological diversity, will be celebrated across Canada by individuals and organizations. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Donna Node Reardon of St. John, do hereby proclaim the week of September 17th to 23rd as National Forest Week in the City of St. John. Next item, City Clerk.
And the final proclamation is the Freedom of the City Proclamation.
Whereas the City of St. John granted freedom of the city to His Majesty's Canadian ship Brunswicker in perpetuity on July the 6th, 1985, and whereas the City of St. John hereby reaffirms the granting of freedom of the city upon His Majesty's Canadian ship Brunswicker, and whereas this freedom is confirmed and granted on the historical occasion of the celebration of the centennial of HMCS Brunswicker and the centennial of the Naval Reserve, and whereas this right is bestowed to march the streets of the City of St. John on all occasions with colors flying, bayonets fixed, and drums beating. The right is hereby affirmed in honor of battles fought and peace preserved. And whereas the City of St. John recognizes the achievements of the Naval Reserve Division, which have brought great honor and pride to this city, Canada, and the British Commonwealth, may you exercise this freedom of the city in memory of all who served and those who lost their lives. And whereas the Freedom Parade will be held on Saturday, the 23rd, commencing at 10 a.m. This Freedom of the City Declaration is presented with utmost respect to acknowledge the courage, sacrifice, and continued service given by the men and women of His Majesty's Canadian ship, Brunswicker. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Donna O'Riordan of St. John, do hereby declare Saturday, September 23rd, as Freedom of the City Day for His Majesty's Canadian ship, Brunswicker. That's this Saturday, folks. Okay, next item, City Clerk.
Next item is under presentations. It's item 8.1, and it's a presentation by St. John Energy entitled Launching a New Era with Birch Hill Wind.
Thank you. I'm passing this one over to Mr. Fogan for the introduction, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Council, I'm pleased to be able to make this introduction here today. The City of St. John continues to work in partnership with St. John Energy to propel forward the success of the utility. The success of St. John Energy provides economic and environmental benefits to not only the city as an organization, but to taxpayers, to St. John Energy customers, as well as to the province. And to present on behalf of St. John Energy here online tonight is Jim Shaw, Board Chair, and Ryan Mitchell, President and CEO of St. John Energy. I'll pass it over to them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ian, and thank you, Your Worship, and members of Common Council. Appreciate how busy you are with all that's going on, certainly this past weekend. And as a utility, we want to be totally transparent. So thank you for making time for us. 2023 has been an exciting year at St. John Energy as we've commissioned our Birch Hill wind farm project in May of 2023. And Your Worship, you spoke at that, and we appreciate that as well. Also, in an effort to be innovative in a rapidly changing energy sector, we have forged ahead with various projects, the mini split, heat pump rentals, the mega pack and battery storage, EV charging stations, our goal of net zero 30 emissions targets by 2030. And even with all this advancement, which is very capital intensive, we have remained financially sustainable. We appreciate that the city is our stakeholder, and everything we do at St. John Energy is for the betterment of our ratepayers and at the same time the city of St. John. And I particularly have appreciated the contribution by council appointees during my tenure on the board, certainly John McKenzie and now Gary Sullivan. So thank you for your contribution to our board. Ryan Mitchell, our CEO, will now elaborate on our year in review through a series of slides.
All right, thank you, Jim. Could I get a thumbs up if folks can see the slides? All right,
we're good,
perfect.
Ryan. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Jim, and good evening, Your Worship, council members, and staff. Tonight, we're going to provide you with a general update and share some highlights related to St. John Energy's operations over the past year. And as Jim had mentioned, there really is no better way to start than by talking about Birch Hill. We are at the dawn of a new era in St. John, a new era of clean and renewable energy with the Birch Hill Wind Project now online. This 42 megawatt project underscored the importance of partnerships that we forged with natural forces and the Tobique First Nation to make it happen. I'm also grateful to our government partners for their support. Partnerships like this will be increasingly important with the energy transition. I'd also like to recognize city staff, the many local contractors involved in the construction, and of course to the dedication of everyone at St. John Energy who helped bring this project to life. But finally, to our community who turned out in big numbers for the official opening in July. Thank you for the tremendous support throughout the project. You may have seen the recent news of the launch of Zero 30, aided by $4 million in funding from Natural Resources Canada. The federal government has asked electricity companies in Canada to reach net zero in their operations by 2035, as a key step in the country reaching carbon neutrality by 2050. We are targeting 5 years earlier, by 2030. Zero 30 will be St. John Energy's roadmap to achieving net zero and helping our customers get there too, if they wish. For 2 years now, we've been pursuing a vision of being a national utility leader in the transition to net zero. which is why we have now firmly set our sights on 2030. There are three main pillars to 030. First is achieving an even cleaner energy supply. This will be accomplished with a particular focus on renewable energy and storage, and through collaboration with MB Power, First Nations, and other partners. Second is innovating with our customers. So what products and services could we provide them? And what role would they like to see St. John Energy play in the future that assists them in the energy transition? EV charging is one example. And I'm often asked about plans to expand our network in the city. And I want you to know that this is a priority for us. In fact, we are working very closely right now with a couple of partners, and while it is too early to give details, I certainly hope that we will be able to share some exciting news in the weeks to come. Third is planning for a future with significantly greater demand for electricity. Where do we need to focus and invest to accommodate both growth and ensure high reliability? When I say a significantly greater demand for electricity, well, utilities across Canada are preparing to double or even triple the amount of electricity when compared to what they deliver today. This is as homes and businesses increasingly turn to electricity to meet their clean energy needs. Many of you will have heard of our Shave the Peak campaigns, where we enlist our customers' help in temporarily scaling back their energy use during times of highest demand in the year, typically the coldest winter days. Shaving this peak demand is important to us. Times of peak demand are costly, attracting charges from our wholesale supplier of electricity that cost us up to $30 million a year. That's because in order to satisfy peak demand, the provincial utility often needs to burn fossil fuel generation plants online that can lead to twice as much CO2 from electricity generation compared to off-peak times. So there's both a financial and an environmental incentive to reduce the peak. In addition to the efforts of thousands of customers during these times, we undertake a number of steps to reduce or shift the load on the grid, such as reducing voltage in a way that customers don't notice, but that delivers significant savings. And then we have our Tesla battery, which we can load up with power in off-peak hours and discharge when it's needed. You may have seen on social media that 3 more Tesla Megapacks with almost 6 megawatts of additional storage arrived in St. John last week, which we expect to have operational early in 2024. They will be tremendous assets, not only in shaving the peak, but also available to balance the energy produced by the Birch Hill Wind Farm. You can see on the chart here that we have been steadily increasing the amount of money that we save through shaving the peak. Last year, more than $1.13 million. And in doing so, we are also curbing carbon emissions in New Brunswick. An overriding focus at St. John Energy, including much of what I've talked about already this evening, revolves around keeping electricity rates stable and affordable. We focus on operational efficiencies. We focus on innovation designed to improve what we offer the customer. We also focus on enhancing the reliability of the grid. We embraced Birch Hill not only for the environmental benefits, but because wind is the lowest cost form of new electricity generation in Canada today. Today, our rates remain among the lowest in Atlantic Canada. Our residential rates are 10% lower than those in Fredericton or Moncton, and over 30% lower than Halifax or Charlottetown. Maintaining competitive rates for our customers has been and will continue to be a priority for St. John Energy. This slide illustrates our consolidated net income, providing you a high-level snapshot of our financial performance. Here you can see how we were doing in 2019 before the pandemic, then the effect the pandemic had in 2020, how we were focused on recovering from that in 2021, and then how we did last year. In 2019, we were slightly above $3 million, and then last year, more than $3.5 million. This performance is very much supported by the efficiencies in our operations, like peak reduction efforts, and by our success in customer innovation. Over the last several years, we've been meeting customers' needs by focusing on providing convenient products and services that will help them improve their comfort and enhance energy efficiency. This includes our heat pump rentals, water heater rentals, and our commercial area lighting program. This graph shows you how demand for these has grown steadily over the last several years. Customers appreciate the innovations, and they like the hassle-free maintenance services that come with them. Best of all, they are helping improve energy efficiency for our customers, which of course is good for the environment. At St. John Energy, we collaborate with all three levels of government as we advance our work in building a cleaner energy future and building a more sustainable utility. At the federal level, we have successfully secured considerable support for projects like Smart Grid, Net Zero, and energy storage. It was heartening to hear MP Wayne Long at our 030 announcement mention how well we are regarded in Ottawa, both for innovation and for getting things done. We've been working closely with the province and MB Power to advance the clean energy transition, to foster economic growth and innovation, as well as climate change action. I really appreciate that what we are setting out to do on these fronts is recognized in Fredericton as a benefit not just to St. John, but the province as well. And of course, our relationship with you, the City of St. John, our shareholder, is very important to us. One of the ongoing priorities is collaborating with the city to advance its climate change action plan. Every year, Electricity Canada, leveraging an independent research firm, polls the customers of utilities to determine how they are performing. St. John Energy has a proud history as being one of the most highly regarded electrical utilities in the nation, and I am happy to share that last year was no exception. You can see here that we continue to rank well, both regionally and nationally, on a variety of important measures. Our reputation is very important to us, and as you know, we are working hard every day to earn and improve upon it. St. John Energy could not accomplish any of this if it were not for our talented and dedicated workforce. Our people drive our success. They are the ones that put our customers first, that ensure the reliability of our services, that lend their ingenuity and commitment to propel innovation. That was on full display leading up to and over the weekend as we responded to the impacts of Hurricane Lee. I am grateful to our staff for all they do each and every day. When I look at our progress over the last year, I'm grateful, certainly grateful to the people of St. John Energy, grateful for the community that believes in us, and grateful to our local elected representatives like you who have partnered with us, worked with us, and supported us along the way. I invite you, as well as the general public, to continue to follow what we are doing and to engage with us. We post news and developments and other items of interest on social media channels, and you can also visit 030.ca and stjohnenergy.com for news and information. We welcome your ideas and suggestions. On behalf of the entire team at St. John Energy, thank you very much for your time this evening. This concludes our presentation. Jim or I would be pleased to answer any questions that you may have, Your Worship.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you, Jim, both for coming in. And this weekend, I certainly did appreciate all your postings on social media because I had an opportunity to repost those. I love the timelines on them because the data I guess I got was that about 900 people had their power interrupted with the storm on Saturday. And so it was nice to have the updates, and the time frame that the updates came in to social media, and then the expected time that the issue would be repaired. So that was really great. And I was happy to brag that there were no serious outages in the city of St. John, because we had St. John Energy on the job. So it was great work this weekend, especially from your team. Always good work, but it was nice to have that as well. So if you can stop sharing your screen, then I'll be able to see who has their hand up, and we'll see if there's any. Oh, we have a couple of either questions or comments. So Councillor Radwan, I'm going over to you first.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, thank you to Mr. Shaw and your board. I think you're doing some fabulous work over there. And thank you, CEO Mitchell. Great presentation. I think it's great to share this message out. And I just really have comments because I gotta say, I keep saying it and I'll continue to say it. I think St. John Energy is one of our biggest competitive advantages that we have in growing the city because it's so reliable. We saw that over the weekend, like the mayor said. Yeah, some power went down, but in the next tweet, I felt like I was seeing it going back up. So, even with having power lines down, it just seemed to be like they're down, okay, and it's up again. Very reliable service, very competitive when it comes to cost. and it's incredible. I think somebody like myself who's looking to keep greening our organizations, St. John Energy has taken the lead, right? So anything that we can do to help support, continue this momentum, I'm all for it. You know, I'm here to support you, and I can just see bigger and greater things as the years go on. But thanks for all of your work and to your staff. The weekend really kind of proved it all. Lee couldn't take over things at St. John Energy. They were keeping the lights on.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor. Reliable. That is a ticket for service. Councillor or Deputy, over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Jim, Ryan, thanks very much for coming in. I got to tell you that from my circles and what I'm hearing, St. John Energy is one of the most respected organizations around, no, hands down. And the complaints that I get is that, you know, I don't want to live in St. John, but why can't St. John Energy service the outlying area? You know, so I saw a guy on the weekend who bought a generator and lived outside of St. John. I said, "What's that? What do you need that for?" You know. But anyway, keep up the good work. You guys are doing a great job and very reliable, as the mayor says, and very proud of the organization that we have in St. John Energy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. It's the innovation too that's intriguing, and I love that, you know, to see that on the move as well for us. So it's a great that you're 5 years earlier for your carbon neutral. It's all good. It's all wonderful news. Anyways, thanks for being here tonight. So I don't see any other hands up.
Mine's up there, Your Worship. I must not be
I
on your
can't
screen.
see you, Councillor O'Sullivan. What's going on here? Okay, go ahead.
That's all right. On my screen, CEO Mitchell is the center square, so maybe he's taking my spot. Just a quick comment and then tee up a question for our CEO from St. John Energy. I really enjoy being on this board for council and the citizens who are watching. This is one highly qualified board of professionals who support our CEO and work on behalf of the residents, all appointed by council. So I enjoy working with this group headed up by Mr. Shaw there. But you're kind of shy in the presentation. I think you mentioned it quickly, but so many benefits for the city from St. John Energy. We can depend that the energy is there, and then when there is a problem, it's back quickly. 10% lower than NB Power, and you mentioned some comparators around Atlantic Canada that certainly citizens of St. John get a good deal. But because of the quality we have, I know that the last few major storms that we've had in the province, we've been exporters of our talent. Maybe you could just touch on what some of our crews are doing to help our neighbors in some of these storms.
Most certainly. So certainly our focus is here at home to ensure that we do get the power back when there are storms and outages, and then once we feel that things are at hand, then we certainly look to respond beyond St. John. So for example, with Lee, we would have dispatched crews to the greater Rossay KV area to support NB Power, and then today they were down in the Charlotte County area again supporting NB Power. In the last hurricane, we supported NB Power and then went on to Prince Edward Island, where our crews spent, I'll say, the best part of a month, helping PEI recover from the last hurricane. So there certainly is the band of brothers approach from the utility perspective, and we have been quite fortunate that we've been able to go and to help others. And I will say, from a cost perspective, we are able to recover that cost, so that cost doesn't, is not absorbed by our ratepayers. We are compensated, by the utilities that are receiving the support.
Yeah, thanks, CEO Mitchell. Certainly a jewel in St. John. Thank you.
Agree. All right. Well, I will say thanks again to you too, and really appreciate the updates. Nice to hear from you, and we'll see you again, I'm sure, soon. So take care and keep up the good work, especially as the innovation component, because there's so many things. This is a real time of change when it comes to the energy sector for the world. And so it's going to be interesting to watch what St. John Energy does over the next few years. So thanks so much.
All right. Thank you. Good night.
Good night. All right, team. I will take a receive and for information, Councillor Hickey and the deputy on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Your worship, just a technical piece of advice. If you go to the top row and hit view, it says change your view, and you can press it, go to large gallery, and then you can
I'm in
see
there right now,
everyone
Hickey. I
active.
see you and I hear you loud and clear. I'm
Okay,
good. I
then
think
you
I've
can
got it
see
figured out.
everybody.
I see everybody. All right. Next item, City Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Next on the agenda is the consideration of bylaws, and the first one is 10.1, and it's a zoning bylaw amendment for 50 Macaulay Avenue, third reading.
Okay, I'm passing this over to Acting Commissioner Poffenroth for the quick intro.
Thank you, Your Worship. Your Worship and members of Council, before you this evening for third reading is a rezoning application which was submitted by James Shador for the property located at 50 Macaulay Avenue. This application seeks to rezone the property from 1-unit residential to 2-unit residential to enable the conversion of a single-family home into a side-by-side duplex. The application received first and second reading on September 5th, following the required public hearing, and I can confirm that all legislative requirements of the Community Planning Act have been met, and the item is now before you to move forward with third reading.
Thank you. Okay, City Clerk, over to you for the motions that we'll require.
Yes, in this case, just two motions, approval at third reading in its entirety, and then approval of third reading by title.
Third reading in entirety. Motion for the deputy and Councillor Sullivan on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
This is entitled A Law to Amend the Zoning Bylaw of the City of St. John. The zoning bylaw of the City of St. John, enacted on the 15th day of December 2014, is amended by amending Schedule A, the zoning map of the City of St. John, by rezoning a parcel of land having an area of approximately 841 square meters located at 50 Macaulay Avenue, also identified as PID number 551-76341, from 1-unit residential to 2-unit residential. And now a motion to approve third reading by title, Your Worship.
Third reading by title. The deputy and Councillor Hickey on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
A law to amend the zoning bylaw of the City of St. John.
Okay, next item, City Clerk.
Next is item 10.2, and it's a zoning bylaw amendment with Section 59 conditions at 341 Lattimore Lake Road.
Okay, I'm passing this over to Acting Commissioner Poffenroth for the intro as well.
Worship and members of Council, before you this evening for third reading is a rezoning application which was submitted by William Cook for the property located at and adjacent to 351 Lattimore Lake Road. This application seeks to rezone the property from rural residential and rural to integrated development to enable the property to be used for the placement of a mini home and for structures associated with a manufactured dwelling transportation business. The application received first and second reading on September 5th, following the required public hearing, and I can now confirm that all legislative requirements of the Community Planning Act have been met, and the item is now before you to move forward with third reading.
Thank you. City Clerk, over to you for the motions.
Thank you, Your Worship. Three motions for this one. First is third reading in its entirety. The second motion is approval of Section 59 conditions, and the final resolution is approval of third reading by title.
Okay, approval of third reading in its entirety. Councillor Harris and Councillor Lowe on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
A law to amend the zoning bylaw of the City of St. John. The zoning bylaw of the City of St. John, enacted on the 15th day of December 2014, is amended by amending Schedule A, the zoning map of the City of St. John, by rezoning a parcel of land having an area of approximately 0.17 hectares located at 351 Lattimore Lake Road, also identified as PID number 00334631, from rural to integrated development. And number 2, amending Schedule A of the zoning map of the City of St. John by rezoning a parcel of land having an area of approximately 8.4 hectares located adjacent to 351 Lattimore Lake Road, also identified as PID number 00421-727 from rural to integrated development pursuant to a resolution adopted by council under Section 59 of the Community Planning Act. And now a motion to approve the Section 59.
Approval of Section 59s. Councillor Killen and Councillor Lowe on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
And a final motion to approve third reading by title.
Third reading by title. Councillor Killen and Councillor Sullivan on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. All right, next item, City Clerk.
And the final bylaw is item 10.3. It's a zoning bylaw amendment at 90 Wilton Street, and this is for third reading.
Passing it back to Acting Commissioner Poffenroth for another intro.
Worship and members of council, before you this evening for third reading is a rezoning application which was submitted by Peter David O'Brien for the property located at 90 Wilton Street. This application seeks to rezone the property from 2-unit residential to mid-rise residential to legalize a long-standing 7-unit residential building. The application received first and second reading on September 5th, following the required public hearing, and I can confirm that all legislative requirements of the Community Planning Act have been met, and the item is now before you to move forward with third reading.
Thank you. City Clerk, over to you for the motions required.
Thank you, Your Worship. Only 2 motions needed here. First is to approve third reading in its entirety, and second motion, third reading by title.
So third reading in its entirety, please. The Deputy and Councillor Radwan on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
A law to amend the zoning bylaw of the City of St. John. The zoning bylaw of the City of St. John enacted on the 15th day of December 2014 is amended by amending Schedule A, the zoning map of the City of St. John by rezoning a parcel of land having an area of approximately 965 square meters located at 90 Wilton Street, also identified as PID number 55218192 from 2-unit residential to mid-rise residential. And now a final motion, third reading by title.
Third reading by title. Councillor Lowe and the Deputy on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
A law to amend the zoning bylaw of the City of St. John.
Okay, City Clerk, next item.
Next on the agenda is item 12.1, and it's labor disruption update, a verbal update from the CAO.
CAO, over to you.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. I want to provide an update on the status of the strike by QP Local 486. First off, thank you to the residents of St. John who've been patient and understanding as we work through this first week of the strike. With the strike, we were down approximately 143 of our team members, and therefore it is your management and non-union team who are working 2 to 3 jobs to keep things running. They have stepped up to fill the gaps left by striking employees. Some of the management staff have moved from work days, regular weekday work days to 12-hour night shifts, and people have been working through the weekend as well. The public can expect to see some level of disruption in public services until the strike is over, primarily in the areas of garbage collection, recycling, and compost, with a focus being on collection of garbage at this time. Building inspection as well can also see impacts, and the customer service center and our one-stop development shop remain closed for walk-in services at this time. However, self-service options, including bill payments, are available through the city's website, and customers can call our 658-4455 number or connect with us by email at service@stjohn.ca. Hours of service are Monday to Thursday, 8:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. The city is experiencing delays in providing curbside garbage collection, compost, and recycling due to the strike activities. And for this reason, as I say, the prioritization is on garbage collection of household recycled materials, and compost is suspended at this time, but we're looking at bringing back those services with working with our outside workforce, Local 18. Updates and reminders will be posted when available and shared through the city's website, Facebook posts, Twitter accounts, and as I mentioned, feel free to email or call our customer service line. As it relates to negotiations, on July 26th, the offer that the bargaining team made to CUPE Local 486 remains on the table, and our bargaining team is ready to get back to the table. However, we still have not received a counteroffer to get back to the table. While we remain hopeful a deal will be struck to get our valued Local 486 employees back in the workplace, we want to be realistic as well, and so we ask for your continued patience. With that, we want to share a presentation with you this evening to address questions or comments that we've been hearing from CUPE in the public realm to ensure factual information is being shared. And the questions, there are three of them. Is the city compliant with its own wage escalation policy? How does the city's offer benchmark to other wage groups? And does the city have slush funds with money set aside? And with that, Mr. Kevin Fudge, our CFO, will deliver a presentation. I will turn it over to him at this time. Thank you.
Over to you, CFO Fudge.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. Can you see my slide?
Not yet.
Not
Oh, here we
yet.
go.
Yes.
We do see them.
All right. Well, before we get started, I just wanted to say, as your Chief Financial Officer with oversight over finance, information technology, risk management, procurement, insurance, I have the privilege of leading a highly professional and dedicated team that is predominantly comprised of members of CUPE Local 486. And I look forward to reaching an agreement and having our colleagues and coworkers who are out on strike return to our team. These are stressful times, stressful on the inside workforce and their families, stressful on this management team and outside workers who are navigating complicated waters to ensure services are maintained for St. John. But as difficult and stressful these conditions are, we also need to balance the interest of taxpayers in St. John who pay the bills and are also facing difficult times, economic times with rising food, housing, fuel, and debt costs. Over the past week, there has been narrative shared about the city's wage escalation policy, as well as information shared about the city's reserve funds, both which are governed by financial policies recommended by the Finance Committee and approved by Common Council. The purpose of this presentation is to set the record straight on the three most frequent questions being raised, which Mr. McGovern just alluded to earlier. Number one, is the city compliant with its own wage escalation policy? Number two, how does the city's offer benchmark to other work groups? And number three, does the city have slush funds? So on this graph, in one snapshot, you see the reason for which we have the wage escalation policy, the reason why it was developed. The orange line in the graph is the city's annual tax base growth. All other lines on that graph that you see before you are each employee wage packages from 2014 to 2019, including management, inside workers, outside workers, police, and fire. As you can see on the graph, wage increases for all employees groups between 2014 and 2019 outpaced the city's tax base growth, which is in orange, which resulted in an unsustainable business model, causing a structural deficit that led to emergency short-term provincial financial assistance and inevitably a significant workforce restructuring in 2020. So So the wage escalation policy was approved on September 23rd, 2019. The primary purpose of the wage escalation policy was to ensure the city spends within its means by ensuring that wages and benefits do not cause either a tax rate increase or a reduction in service levels. And what you have on the slide is excerpts right from the policy. So subsection 4.2 of the wage escalation policy describes how this policy is to be applied. It is the application section of the policy. The policy was authored by my department. The application section of the policy does not direct or mandate staff to offer a prescribed formula to employee groups. However, it does mandate staff to ensure the city's overall wage and benefit budget is directed or mandated to not exceed a cap that's formulated and set forth in the policy. As you can see in the wording on the slide, the word budget is bolded as that word is used throughout the application section of the wage escalation policy, referring to the wage and benefit budget for the city. This does not mean the policy creates a budget floor where the city must spend the maximum amount of the wage escalation policy. It is a budget ceiling that ensures that the wage escalation policy cap on the budget is not exceeded. This is important, as the city needs the flexibility to allocate budget where it makes the most sense, given the goals set forth in the 10-year strategic plan, the need to invest in growth readiness projects, to be competitive in tax rate, and to have flexibility to pivot when economic conditions change to ensure the long-term financial plan targets are met. So the answer to the first question is the city compliant with the wage escalation policy? The answer is yes. And this is how it's calculated. In the middle section of the slide, you'll see the tax base increase for the years 2023, 2022, and 2021. The wage escalation policy rate is simply the average of the 3 years of the tax base, which equates to 5.35%. This is then compared to CPI plus 1, because the policy mandates the cap of the policy to be the lower of both numbers for the next budget year. To ensure we use the most relevant CPI number, because it is for the following year's budget, we use the New Brunswick CPI figure for September year over year, which is released around the same time as our assessment-based information is released in mid-October. So compliance and testing compliance with the policy is quite simple. It's calculated by looking at the year-over-year percentage increase in the wage and benefit budget for the city, not by group, as you can see at the top, to ensure the calculation is below the wage escalation policy limit. You can see the 2023 wage and benefit budget was compliant with an increase over budget of 2022 by 5.304%, below the wage escalation policy limit of 5.35%. The wage escalation policy budget cap has to absorb more than just the annual wage escalation. It has to absorb increases in staff. It has to absorb new positions in the establishment, in not only permanent but casual, increased overtime cost, increased costs associated with fringe benefits, increased pension cost, promotional increase, and step and group increases that occur throughout the year for employees. This is why the policy is not a budget floor. The city needs the flexibility to run its business and additional payroll costs to support service objectives. The last section of the policy sets out the roles and responsibility of council, Finance Committee, and the CFO actually in this section. CUPE is misinterpreting subsection 5.1.2 of the wage escalation policy that states that it's council's role to not only approve the policy, but as well as to direct staff to use it when negotiating future contracts. The intent of 5.1.2 is to ensure staff use the wage escalation cap to budget accordingly so that wage and benefit envelopes are well understood when negotiating wage packages within a union, or in some cases, multiple unions simultaneously in the same year. There's only so much money in the pot, so to speak, and the policy provides a line of sight to that envelope through the wage escalation policy so that negotiating teams know exactly what the city's affordability limits are. And before I get into benchmarking, I do want to make one final point on the wage escalation policy. This slide shows wage settlements for employee groups from 2020 to 2023, all while a period of time where the wage escalation policy was in full effect, including for management, police, local 18, and fire. During this period, some negotiated agreements included 0%, even though the wage escalation policy limit was higher, as is the case of management and local 18 in the years 2021 and 2022, circled on the table. And in other cases, employee groups received wage packages that were either below or above the wage escalation policy. The city was compliant with its wage escalation policy in all of these years. We've also heard that management received 5.35% in 2023. However, if you take over a 3-year period, the previous 2 years management received 2 zeros, and the 3-year average for management is 1.78%. In the case of Local 18, the wage escalation policy was negotiated into the final 2 years of the contract. However, the city chose to do so, creating flexibility with a reduction in the minimum number by 43 positions and reducing the overall wage and benefit budget. In addition, in that agreement, the wage escalation formula was only for the final 2 years of the agreement, and both parties took risks given the rate was well into the future and unknown, as opposed to a scenario where the wage escalation rate is already known and there is no risk to ask for it. So now on to benchmarking. The city's July 26th 5-year offer to CUPE Local 486 is before you on the slide in green. This was released by the city, includes a $5,000 one-time payment to all 143 employees in 2022. That cost approximately $710,000, followed by 5.35% in 2023, which is equivalent to the approved wage escalation policy rate, as well as 2.1% in 2024 and 2025, and 2.25% in the final year, 2026. This slide presents what the Local 486 maximum salaries for groups 4 to 9 would be if the city offer were to be accepted for the years 2022 to 2026. So the maximum current salaries are presented in the column for the year 2021. That's the current maximum salaries in the expired agreement in the column 2021. If we look at the low and the high on that salary table, for example, a Group 4 position, such as for a position such as administrative assistant, the maximum salary in this group for Group 4 would be $52,701 in 2021, and based on the city's offer, it would increase to $59,179 by 2026. On the other end of the spectrum, if looking at the maximum salary for Group 9 position, as in the case of an accounting supervisor or a network specialist, the maximum salary for that group would increase from $78,336 in 2021 to $87,965 in 2026. And as you all know, fringe benefit costs are expensive. They cost the city approximately 25% of overall salaries are the cost of fringe benefits. And employee benefits are important as part of any employee contract. Important to acknowledge key benefits in the CUPE 486 agreement. I'm just going to read a few of those benefits out. So first and foremost, there's a 35-hour work week. However, time beyond 35 hours is paid at overtime rates or as time off in lieu. There's also 13 paid statutory holidays. The members can accrue up to 7 weeks or 245 hours of paid vacation leave annually on completing 25 years of service. An additional 14 hours of flexible paid time off exists in the contract for flex time. There's up to 35 hours of paid time off to care for family members in the contract. They can accumulate up to 1,400 hours of paid sick time, which is about 2 years, earned at a rate of 10.5 hours per month. And they also have access to a sick bank after the exhaustion of personal sick leave time paid for by the employer to a maximum grant of 3,640 hours during the tenure of their employment. And even though it's not in the collective agreement, since October 2022, most CUPE Local 486 employees or members, have worked a 4-day compressed work week, allowing them to take every Friday off, with the exception of PSCC operators as they work shift work. So on to benchmarking. CUPE Local 486 outperformed the wage increases of other groups during the period of their last collective agreement for the years 2015 to 2021. This slide shows inside workers' cumulative wage increases from 2015 to 2021, benchmarked to New Brunswick CPI, local 18 wage increases, management wage increases, and the city's tax base for the same period. Local 486 is the red line on the graph with a cumulative wage increase of 15.75% from 2015 to 2021. During a period of time when the city's cumulative tax base growth over that same period in green was only 7.81%, contributing to structural deficit issues as I referred earlier in the presentation. New Brunswick CPI was also lower during this time frame at 12.54%, and also falling under was Management Group with a cumulative 9.61% and Local 18 with 13.50%. The concluding message for this slide is inside workers received wage escalation rates above city affordability, above inflation, and above other employee groups during the period of 2015 to 2021. If we compare the cumulative Local 486 wage increases from 2015 to 2023, assuming the city's offer for the years 2022 and 2023, it will place Local 486 cumulative increases for 2015 to 2023 at 21.1%. This is the red line on the graph. Compare this to the city's 3-year rolling tax base over the same period, which is the blue line, which is the calculation of the wage escalation policy. That cumulative rolling tax base for that same period is 15.67%, meaning inside workers would still be 5.3% higher than the cumulative wage escalation rates during this time frame, which is one measure of the city's affordability. Management and NBCPI are also included on this slide. And this table is just the data that supports the previous slide. So you can see for all those years, the first column is the 3-year rolling tax base of the city. The second column is the Local 486 wage increases and the differences. You can see other than in 2022, where the city is offering a one-time $5,000 payment, CUPE Local 486 member wage increases exceeded or was equivalent to the city's rolling 3-year tax base growth. And over the overall period exceeded by 5.44%. If you compare Local 486 wage packages, including the negotiated contract for 2016 to 2021, in addition to the city offer for the years 2022 to 2026, to the most recent and previous negotiated teachers' contracts as a benchmark, Local 486 cumulative wage increases during this period would be 25.55% with the city's offer, compared to 16.15% for the teachers' 2 collective agreements. The line in the middle up to 2023 are the cumulative management wage increases from 2016 to 2023 at 13.96%. We also looked at turnover rates for CUPE 486. The blue bar is what HR indicates as a measure of healthy turnover, and the orange bar is the actual turnover experience in Local 486 membership. Actual turnover is below the benchmark for healthy turnover during a very competitive and advantageous employee market. And this may be an indicator of either very high job satisfaction or that the city wage and benefit packages are very competitive. Finally, we need to remember, although the city received a healthy tax base growth, very healthy tax base growth for 2022 and 2023, most of that growth has been in market adjustments and is at risk of future fluctuation. For example, in 2023, the city's tax base growth was 8.76%. That's green bar on the right. But if you look at new construction, new builds, real growth, only 1.35% of that growth was actually in new construction. The rest of that growth was in market adjustment. So we talked about the wage escalation policy. We talked about benchmarking. Let's talk about, does the city have slush funds? City absolutely does not have slush funds. I take exception to the word slush funds, as it is a derogatory word as intended to imply there are hidden or discretionary funds available to pay a workforce, and that just simply is not the case. The city's reserve funds are governed by a policy approved by Common Council, and reserve funds play a key part in meeting the goals of the city's long-term financial plan and growth objectives. City of St. John reserve funds are also the lowest amongst New Brunswick's 3 biggest cities. This slide benchmarks St. John's reserve funds to Moncton and Fredericton. St. John has approximately $37 million in combined operating and capital reserve funds in the general fund and in St. John Water. As a comparison, in Moncton, in their audited financial statements, they present $104 million in combined reserve funds, and Fredericton is reporting approximately $47 million in reserve funds. Again, all 3 cities, St. John, Moncton, and Fredericton, are based on the audited 2022 financial statements. The reserve fund policy prescribes the specific uses of our reserve funds, which is for one-time uses, such as to mitigate the risk of costs associated with unforeseen events, such as severe weather events, to fund major capital renewal to avoid new debt, such as the case of saving up for a multiplex, or to save up to invest in growth opportunities, and to fund the infrastructure deficit. Reserve funds are not appropriate to pay wage and benefit expenses or any other annual operating expenses because those expenses require funding every single year. Whereas once you spend a reserve fund, it's gone forever. Reserve funds are also very transparent. They're reported, as I said, in the city's audited financial statements for the public to see, and all transfers into a reserve fund and all transfers out of a reserve fund require a resolution of Common Council in open session. Staff cannot put money into reserve funds or take money out of reserve funds without bringing that forward to Common Council. So let's go into what's in them. For operating reserves, per our audited financial statements, the city has $7.4 million in operating reserves approved by council and are designated to mitigate operating risk or to fund one-time growth initiatives. Some of these reserves you can see on the slide include Severe Weather Reserve Fund, a WorkSafe New Brunswick Premium Fluctuation Fund, COVID Reserve Funds, one time, a St. John Energy Reserve for tax rate stabilization that's premised in an agreement with St. John Energy, one-time funding for projects such as city's commitment to the St. John Theatre Company. So you can see they're all one-time in nature. With respect to the Capital Reserve Fund, the city has approximately $19 million in the Capital Reserve Fund. But over $10 million of this capital reserve is from a program that has been in place for over a decade at the city, which is the Fleet and Computer Replacement Program, that allows the city to replace assets without needing to lever debt. These funds have built up due to supply chain issues and difficulty sourcing replacement assets. And we expect these balances to deplete as we begin investing again and the market opens back up. $2 million of this capital reserve is from the windup of 2 former city entities, the windup of Develop St. John, which also has the former St. John Industrial Parks, and also the windup of Discover St. John, both one-time funds, and they've been set aside and approved and reserved by council to be used for specific purposes, such as the Strategic Land Reserve. There are also one-time funds from other levels of government set aside to address capital needs, infrastructure deficit, the North Depot relocation project, and in the transit facility. St. John Water also has reserve funds. They've got operating reserves of $2.3 million, potable rate stabilization reserve of $1.1 million, an industrial rate stabilization reserve of $1.2 million, and then for capital reserves, St. John Water has an infrastructure deficit that's near $250 million, so we don't have a lot of capital reserves, but it's a good start. We've got a fleet replacement reserve of $2.3 million, industrial capital reserve of $2.7 million. That's made up of rates that's collected from industry, not rates collected from potable customers, and then a potable capital reserve fund for $3.3 million. So in conclusion, City of St. John offered to QP Local 486 is fully compliant with the wage escalation policy. The city's July 26 offer benchmarks slush funds. The city has reserve funds. And they're lower than Moncton and Fredericton. They have strong governance with oversight through a reserve fund policy, recommendations from Finance Committee, and through Common Council. They are completely transparent, as all transfers in and out require council resolution in open session, and they're audited. And finally, they're not appropriate to be used to fund annual operating expenses like wages and benefits, because again, they're one-time only, and they're for one-time only purposes. With that, that concludes my presentation. Back over to CAO McGovern.
Thank you, Commissioner Fudge. I always enjoy that tutorial. It's I know we've heard it more than once, but it is a good one, and it does reinforce all of the policies that we have in place, a long-term, strategic plan on our 10 financial policies. So it's great to see it. All right, I guess I'm going to go to. Oh, you're going to stop sharing that, correct?
I'm trying, Your Worship. I'm trying to stop sharing, and it's not letting me for some reason. So
okay.
I can either stay on or jump off.
Okay, stay on there, but I now have had assistance with figuring this out, so I have 3 people with hands up in this meeting. Okay, first up, oh, that's better, is Councillor Sullivan. I have to thank Councillor Harris. He sent me a little bit of info of how to get all the hands. So, Councillor Sullivan, you're up first.
Thanks, Your Worship. Thanks, CFO Fudge, for the tutorial. Incredibly important to remember. I guess one piece of history that CFO Fudge didn't mention is I guess the reason we have these policies in the first place. Back in the dark days of infrastructure deficits, of ongoing operational deficits, there were 2 pieces of the puzzle that we had to do. The first was to find $10 million in what we were doing in order to get things back to balance. And the other piece was to put a long-term financial plan in place so we didn't end up there again. And we have a whole bunch more policies than these that are keeping us straight. But, what they do is they set a rigor for council. And that rigor allows us to do things like a strategic plan to invest. If all we did was hit the maximum on the wage escalation policy, for example, every year, we could do nothing new. All we would be doing is funding the status quo, and actually still funding the status quo at a bit of risk because it doesn't count inflationary pressures on the non-salary related expenses that we have, like fuel and things that we need to purchase, salt for the road and all those things. So, having that rigor allows us then to say, okay, we want to invest in, and then those are the priorities of council. I certainly understand that we want to be fair with our employees because they are the backbone of our organization. And I think a lot of the comparators that were brought in that presentation show that we take all of that into consideration and certainly have. But these financial policies are important, and they have really allowed us to invest strategically in the future of St. John. So thanks for the presentation, CFO Fudge. As the mayor said, I too appreciate the tutorial from time to time.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Redwan, over to you next.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, CFO Fudge. I think that was great. I kind of echo what our Chair Sullivan had to say, because I mean it's been great for quality of life for us to be able to make some of these investments. But I just wanted to ask you, because this is something I've always struggled with, and hopefully we continue to have a very positive growth projector coming ahead, and I don't see any reason why people wouldn't want to invest in St. John. But what happens, say for example, we all of a sudden somewhere down the road had a negative growth rate year over year? What would that do to the operating budget?
Good question, Councillor Radwan. We actually did have a negative growth year. It was in 2014. It was a negative 0.48%. It's actually on that slide, I believe I showed earlier, from 2014 to 2019, and that contributed to a structural deficit. You know, property taxes are 80% of the city's revenue, and when you have a negative growth, while you've got 2+% growth in your wages and benefits, which represent about 60% of your budget, so you don't have to be an accountant to do the math. It's going to put you in the hole real quick. So we have to, obviously consider that. That's why the wage escalation policy does it over a 3-year period, so it smooths that risk out. So you should be able to, with the smoothing of that, you should be able to mitigate that risk. We also need to acknowledge the fact here in St. John that something we weren't accustomed to is we have a significant risk exposure when it comes to the unconditional grant. It's probably around 8 to 10% of our overall budget in terms of revenue. It's completely exposed to the policies of the provincial government, and we know, just recently through the last review, within a snap of a finger, it went from 16.5 million down to, we know it's going to around $13 million. So that's a significant amount of money to make up. So we also need to make sure we've got flexibility to absorb those kind of unintended or unexpected events that happen in our business.
No, it's really helpful, CFO Fudge. Thank you, Simon. And that kind of helps explain why that 3-year rolling average is there to try to mitigate risk, but it doesn't eliminate it all. So if all of a sudden the growth started to go downward, and once again, I think that's why we have to keep letting everybody know why St. John is such a great place to invest in, right? And sing all the praises that we have for the city, like St. John Energy and, obviously tourism, the cruise ships, all the tourism, everything that we have going for us at the port with the containers and such, and being a welcoming community in general, I think for the most part, but, there always is that risk. And I remember looking at that graph in the past where there was that big dip, and that big dip sent me a very clear message that, things could change, with the cost of inflation. We do have some developers that are kind of pausing right now with the cost of interest rates, right? And the cost for the city is increasing. So I think it's always good for us to have that kind of top of mind, that we don't want to see that slide, because it does put us at risk of changing our operating budget, which could mean actually having to slash the budget, which would reduce services and potentially jobs. So anyway, that's my number one priority, is to try to keep St. John going in that great trajectory that we're in right now, so that we don't see that. We can continue to see those investments, which give more jobs and more opportunities. So
yeah, just one final note on your question, Councillor Radwan, that there is also another control mechanism in that wage escalation policy. It's the lower of the 3-year rolling tax base, or CPI +1. So typically with your tax base, if you're having a negative tax base, it's probably being felt elsewhere in the economy and felt in the inflation rate as well. So there is an additional control there that we have in place in the policy.
That's great. No, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harris, you're up next.
Thank you, Your Worship. There's a couple things in this presentation, Commissioner Fudge, that I just want to draw some attention to. One of them is this 10-year strategic plan. I understand it's something that we need to protect. I was the chair who brought it to council. I guess the hard part I have is understanding what do we need to protect within it, because there's a lot of money that goes into that 10-year strategic plan that is infrastructure based, that doesn't come out of our operational budget. I know that everything's connected, and the two can interact, and the two can have domino effects in certain cases. But I guess from my knowledge, we still don't understand exactly what the totality of that cost is, because numbers are moving, and numbers are, in the case of inflation, they're changing and they're growing more rapidly than we anticipated. And in other cases, there may be new initiatives where we can align with federal and provincial governments to synergize with what we need to expend to achieve the goals of the 10-year strategic plan. So I guess, just putting that in there, I need some context on, what are some of the assumptions that we're making, or what are some of the the warning labels, if you will, that we need to be careful of when we protect the 10-year strategic plan. I think this is going to be an ongoing discussion. I don't fully expect us to have an answer on that because I know this was something we struggled with even when we were planning the 10-year strategic plans. How do we cost it? Very difficult to cost something that's planning that far out. So I can appreciate there's attention we have to pay to it, but just I think as we go forward, if we can start to look at what are those short-term goals of the 10-year strategic plan, what is our dart throw number, and what is at risk, that might be helpful. Just in a decision-making capacity to understand what is really at risk, how close are we, how much do we need to pay attention to, all that.
Yeah,
Go
ahead. No, yeah, I was going to say you're bang on. I see that the CEO's hand is up to speak. I'll take an attempt here. I mean, it's called a plan because it's a plan, and when you're talking about a plan that's over a 10-year period, it's embedded within some assumptions, right? It's all based on assumptions, and what you think is a good assumption today may be a completely crazy assumption 2 years from now when all of a sudden there's a war between Russia and Ukraine and there's a pandemic. Like, you're doing it based on a point in time, and you're trying to do so. I think on the operating side, we do quite a good job in doing a 10-year projection of what our needs are with the long-term financial plan. We try to layer in there as much as we can, what we can afford in terms of service enhancements. I think where we can do better is on the capital side, which is also a significant part of the strategic plan. And I think Mr. Fogan is one of his major initiatives is leading, helping develop a 10-year capital plan that's really itemized by projects, that you can see how it aligns with the strategic plans put in place by council. And I think the combination of both. It's also very helpful to have a 10-year capital plan, even though the numbers won't be exactly accurate when we get to those points in the future. But when other levels of government come calling and saying, what are your priorities? Where do you need funding? What do you need? You have a plan in place ready in hand to give to the federal and provincial government to say, here's our priorities. This aligns with our strategic plan, and this is where we want you to focus. So absolutely, you're bang on. I think we're working towards that.
CEO McGovern, by all means, jump in. There was just one more point I wanted to make. I'll pick up after you go there.
Yeah, I'll send it over to you, CEO McGovern. Yeah, that's fine.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Just building on what Commissioner Fudge said, there's a number of things, and just going from memory right now, there's the different projects, whether it be traffic calming projects were deemed a priority, whether it be improving the sidewalk clearing, from the rate we're at now of approximately 50 or 55% to 75%, which, will require additional resources and equipment, whether it's enhancing the conditions of our sidewalk. Another one was, the walkability and the safety of our sidewalks to 75%. The North End Neighborhood Plan, advancing that and all the outcomes that will flow from that plan and the ability to implement them. Climate Change Action Plan, in terms of our priorities of readying our communities so that we're prepared for the effects of climate change. So, there's a long list there, and what the wage escalation policy is really intended to do is to allow us to balance those wages with the ability to move forward with council's adopted strategic implementation plan. So.
Right, and I can certainly appreciate that. They all go hand in hand. I guess my last parting shot would be, I think I see a need for some layering and some additions to the wage escalation policy. And I'm not going to try to put a motion on the fly here to make those, but some thought for consideration for the other members of council and the community who may want to weigh in and engage on this. Not everybody needs the same help, right? When we're talking about equity and equality, right, we compare and we benchmark unions against other municipalities and other unions. But the reality is, if you're making $80,000 a year in 2019 and you're making $80,000 a year in 2023, you are not squeezed nearly as much as somebody who was making $45,000 a year in 19 and $45,000 a year in 23. The poverty line has risen. The inflationary rates and the CPI indexes have really chewed in to the necessities of life costs for those people on those income earning brackets. And so I just think we need to layer that in our understanding so that decision makers can really look at this and say, okay, benchmarking is important, but let's not forget about those who are closest to the margin here in our income continuum in the corporation of the City of St. John. So I'll leave it with that, and I see Chair Sullivan has his hand up. So thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Harris. I'll go over to Councillor Sullivan.
Thanks, Your Worship. And thanks, Councillor Harris. Actually, I certainly have staff who back me up, but have pretty good knowledge of the long-term financial plan. Being chair of the strat plan certainly would be similar to your knowledge. But you bring up something really important. Everything you just described about the value of money, it all falls within the current wage escalation plan. Like, because the wage escalation plan is a budgetary plan, we can decide within that, where we want to allocate wages. But the whole thing has to stay under that policy, because you asked for some examples, and so I got browsing the strat plan, and one of the things is complete the plan, full implementation of the integrated customer service center. So if we want a full implementation, so we want to hire some more people in there to make it work, we need the room under the wage escalation plan in order to hire those people, or we have to shift from another lesser priority into that. So by keeping the budget policy of the wage escalation plan in check, that gets to those pieces of the long-term strategic plan that we want to implement. But not lost on me is your comment about, the $45,000 squeeze versus the $80,000 squeeze. But ultimately, as long as all of that falls under the overall budget to allow us to continue to do what we have in our long-term strategic plan, I think those are also important discussions. Hope that helps.
Thank you, Councillor. All right. Don't see any other hands up. I have a quick question, CFO Fudge. And I think we have, in all of the years that I've worked with the city on council, I've met some wonderful people, great people. We hire expertise. We have a whole scope of expertise. So I guess I'll ask, out of our 177 million budget, what would we be spending on wages and benefits?
The 2023 budget, $93 million of the $177 million budget is in wages and benefits.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I get that, it's either wages and benefits or services and services, a combination of the two that we're spending our money on, mainly. So, all right, interesting to know. All right, so I'm going to take a motion to receive for information the presentation, Councillor Radwan and the deputy on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, CFO Fudge. Okay, City Clerk, next item.
Thank you, Your Worship. Next on the agenda is 12.2, and it's new Provincial Municipal Highway Partner Program project list.
Commissioner Hugenholtz, this is going over to you.
Yes, good evening, Your Worship, members of council. Before you this evening are the details of the planned funding application to the province for key infrastructure improvements in our community. The Provincial Municipal Highways Partnership Program provides funding for improvements to what were previously referred to as provincially and regionally designated highways within our municipal boundaries. So the province is looking for eligible projects for 2025 and 2026. So city staff have reviewed the rated pavement condition index for the various PDH, RDH roadways within our boundaries, and we've developed a list of streets that are due for resurfacing in the near future. And we've included those in our funding application, a draft of which is attached to the council report. Also included in this application is the roundabout at the intersection of Loch Lomond Road and the Airport Arterial. This has been identified as a priority in Move SJ and is proposed in our application to be 100% funded by the province. The investments proposed in this application are aligned with our asset management plans and strategic plans. We are seeking council's endorsement of this application as presented this evening. I will turn it over back to the chair and answer any questions that there may be.
Yeah, I do have a question here for you, Councillor Ogden, over to you. You've got you're on mute there, Councillor, so you'll have to.
How's that?
That's much better.
Thank you. Yeah, I spoke to Michael about this earlier, and for a number of years, a lot of people have wanted the pedway, which runs down to City Road, which is a provincial road, the cage or the fencing that runs over the pedway fixed. Long before I was elected to council, I spoke to the province, I spoke to Gateway. The province has to pay for it, Gateway is willing to do it, but it's often referred to me that the city hasn't pushed for it. And I've asked since I've been elected each year that this happens. The pedway is one of the few walkways between all 5 of our priority neighborhoods. And our priority neighborhoods are where people walk the most because of reasons for cost of transportation and such. So that's where we should have great emphasis on sidewalks and pedways. This pedway is used every morning by dozens and dozens of daycare children and people going to work, such as at St. Joseph's. And it's not well lit. When my mother was at St. Joe's for 4 years, I heard it all the time that it's not well lit. It's kind of forgotten about, and the people who live in these areas have often been forgotten about because we seem to be building cities for cars and not people. And so one thing I'd like to do is to get that cage or fencing replaced. And also I worry about the provincial roads of the image that they're projecting. For instance, the Gateway sometimes washes the bottom of the walls, but they're extremely dirty. We tried to do it with marigolds and murals, and it's unbelievable. They have to be power washed, like the one by Hilliard Street, all along by Lancaster, behind Lancaster Mall, down to the toll booths. We used to have marigolds running in some of the centers, and now they're just all weeds. And when I talk to the province, they say, well, it's got to be a city priority. When I talk to the city, they say, well, it's got to be a provincial priority. And when I talk to Gateway, they say, well, no, they're paid billions of dollars for things that, anyway. And I know that other councillors have heard about the exits and entrances, but I like those things added so that because the provincial system is runs right through the middle of our city, and it has a lot to do with our image of our city. And well, the way it is right now, it hurts the image of our city. So I'd like to have that addressed in these meetings. And many people have been pushing for it, but I'm not sure we're being heard. So I'd like to council to see what you have to say about it, but I'd like those things fixed, please. Thank you.
So what's the question there, Councillor?
Could the image of the throughway and the exits and the provincial roads that run through our city be upgraded? Like City Road doesn't look like it once did. It looks terrible now. And the pedway, the Stanley Street pedway, can that be the new cage put on and such? It's all rusted and such. It gives a very bad image of the city.
Commissioner Hugenholtz, I'll toss that over to you for a little bit of a
thank you,
perspective.
Your Worship, and through you to the councillor. Yeah, we've heard some of these concerns numerous times about the cleanliness, the maintenance standards along the highway, and some of the on and off ramps. That has been a point of discussion in some recent meetings with DTI staff. That's not yielded a lot of results as of yet, but we do have plans and a schedule to meet on a regular basis, and it's our intent to continue to raise those concerns and hope to find a resolution for our community.
Could I just respond to that, Mayor?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, that's not what Michael, that's not what I'm getting. I'm getting that it's not a city priority. And I don't know, I don't know how to get that across, is that our priority neighbors are so important and the walkability is so important. And I just think that we're forgetting the people who walk and they don't have any other options. So I'm not hearing that it's a city priority. You know, people listen to you, but are they really listening? So I'm not getting that it's a city priority. If it's not a city priority, the province, which has a huge DTI centralized decision making in Fredericton, is not going to respond to us. So I hope that we can finally get some image work and get some things taken care of, because we seem to be building a city where we're building roads to get out of the city as opposed to for the people who live inside the city.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Radwan, over to you next.
Thank you, Mayor. I know the CAO had his light on. I don't know. If you wanted to speak
Yeah,
now.
CAO McGovern, did you want to chime in on that, or are you good with?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to reassure Councillor Ogden that it is, as Commissioner Hugenholtz has meant it, as Commissioner Hugenholtz has said, it is a priority. You know, a number of the items that we hear from council and the public, we have compiled, and we are meeting with DTI and commenced that just over the past month or so. And we're going to have a regular cadence of meetings with the senior officials within DTI to see if we can address some of these longstanding matters to bring resolution and to improve the overall, you know, aesthetics of St. John. So.
Thank you, CAO. I will add to that is that I agree with Councillor Ogden. It's, you know, cars and are more of a priority. So that one is a difficult one, but I think we can certainly, like you say, push for that as well as when you meet with DTI, because we have a lot of other priorities too when it comes to DTI and their infrastructure here. So I'll go back to you, Councillor Radwan.
Thank you. I just have a quick question, actually. So, Commissioner Hugenholtz, I'm just wondering, the $1.5 million that we're asking for the airport arterial roundabout from the province, will that cover the entire cost of it? I know it's their road.
Yeah, through you, Your Worship, to the councillor, that's a good question. I guess, look, that's our best estimate that we have at this point in time. We have not done the detailed design that would allow us to have some firmer costing. So basically that's the best number that we have right now.
Okay, but that would cover all of it as far as we know right now, kind of thing.
Correct.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Harris.
Yep. I just wanted to point out once again that this issue, especially of the Stanley Street Bridge, goes back to 2007. So it is one of these issues that just ever since I got here to council, it's so frustrating that we have, you know, officials working within DTI saying in the Telegraph Journal in 2007 that tenders were out for the replacement of the Stanley Street Bridge chain link. And it looks worse today than it does then. There's nothing that's ever been done. So I don't know what more you can do except to continue to point that out for negligence and just, you know, inappropriate engagement with the city. But I mean, whatever staff needs us to do, I've raised it with two ministers of responsible for infrastructure and DTI in emails, but I'm at a loss at what to do to get them to actually do what they said they were going to do 15 years ago. So anyway.
Thank you, Councillor. I was going to say, I think, you know, we're all trying to change the culture from driving to focusing on, you know, active transportation. So I think it's just something that we just need to keep striving for at the end of the day. All right. So we've got that information from Commissioner Hugenholtz. So I will ask for a receipt for information. Councillor Harris and Councillor Radwan on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item, City Clerk.
Yes, Your Worship. Next item is from the consent agenda. It's the Pro Kids policy, and that was item 5.1 on your agenda, and it's now 14.1.
Okay, Councillor Redmond, you had some questions or whatever about that policy? I've got to get to
Yeah,
it.
so thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. It's actually, it's a great policy. Everything looks really good in it. There was only one concern that I had, and in checking with the common clerk, it sounds like I need to make a motion to change it. At the top of page 28, it talks about basically if there was some sort of unprofessional conduct happening within the committee, that it says, section 2, if the person continues to be disruptive at future events or meetings, one final verbal warning will be issued. If another incident occurs, that committee member will be placed on suspension and the City of St. John staff will complete a follow-up. It is at the discretion of the Senior Manager of Community Services to allow that committee member to remain on the advisory board to complete their term or to be asked to resign. What I would like to motion is that the Senior Manager of Community Services be changed to Common Council, because this is actually a governance challenge. And, so basically, it's not supposed to be put on staff for them to be asking a community member that's been assigned from council to leave the committee, right? This is a governance issue. So, and I know that's, Caricos I had spoken to earlier, and she said that she would bring it forth to council, which is fine, but I'd like to be able to see just the words change for the future. If we have different staff on board, it does have to come to council. It's a governance issue. It's not something that operations should be taking care of. It would be putting staff in a bad position.
All right, I do have Councillor Hickey has his hand up. We'll go to Caricos for her take on this, I guess. But this is another motion on the fly, which I don't know if everybody's read through this. And we've talked about motions on the fly, and that's why we have our policy on motions, because we'd like to get some feedback first. So let's go to Councillor Hickey.
Yeah,
and then
I
we'll
get
go to
that,
staff.
Mayor. The biggest thing is, I could motion to table it, but I didn't really want to do that. It's really just a change of a couple of words. And anyway, I know what you mean about motions on the fly, but I would hope everybody would have read it. It's in our packet. We only had 150 pages for today.
This is true. Councillor Hickey, over to you.
Just very quickly, Your Worship, I would just suggest to the councillor perhaps a friendly amendment to adjust to the nominating committee instead of to council.
I mentioned that to the clerk, but he said that it actually has to come to council. I thought the same thing, Councillor Hickey.
Okay, so can I get a little bit of, can we go to staff on this one? Is Caricos available? Or maybe the city clerk to figure out how we're going to do this, because we need to, we should have, for any of our motions, everything in the kit here, every motion that we have has a recommendation from staff. So, this has come, I don't have a recommendation from staff. Councillor Norton, you're next.
Thank you, Your Worship. May I just make a recommendation that we make a referral motion to the CAO, and he can refer that to appropriate staff and then circle back to council.
Perfect.
I don't want to get into a debate here. If I could get a seconder for a referral motion, this will move this file on.
That's great.
Councillor Stewart, okay. Okay, that's perfect. So we'll get them to come back with that for us. So on the question, all in favor of referring to the city CAO? And opposed?
That's great. Thank you.
Motion carried. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. All right, City Clerk, next item.
Thank you, Your Worship. Next is item 15.1. It's a submission from the Pension Board of Trustees Annual General Meeting letter requesting attendance of a member of council, and there's a recommendation for council to select a representative to send to this meeting.
Yeah, okay, Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't want to blindside him, but I think our best
choice for this recommendation would be our chairman of the Finance Committee.
Agreed.
Willing to attend, I would very much like them to be our representative.
All right, so you make it.
we have Gary Sullivan represent council at this event.
I'll take a seconder on
I
that.
will volunteer him too. That's great.
Okay, Councillor Norton, it's okay, and he's been volunteered as well. All right, Councillor Sullivan, are you accepting that, that offer?
Yeah, I attended last year, and it's an exciting time about numbers, so I'm in.
Okay, sounds good. So I guess I'll vote then I'll ask the question on the motion to ask Councillor Sullivan to go for us. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. You're in, Councillor. Thank you so much. Next item, City Clerk.
Next is item 15.2. It's a number of letters with respect to homelessness, and there's a recommendation to receive for information.
Okay, Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Worship. I'm not sure that receiving for information is the best route, and I would actually like to see us direct the mayor to do a cover letter to accompany the 16 letters in the kit and forward them to all appropriate province of New Brunswick departments, so that we forward that correspondence on along with a cover letter from the mayor, and see if we could do it that way. If I could get a seconder, that would be my direction on that.
Councillor Radwan, you're seconding that motion. Okay, on the question, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. All right. Next item, City Clerk.
Next is item 16.1, and this was added to the agenda. It's a proposed motion by Councillor Norton with respect to AIM.
Councillor Norton, over to you.
I would, I guess, Common Clerk, looking for some advice here, but I would make a motion that we can add this motion to the agenda, and I understand that would take a 2/3 vote of council in order to do so. Then we can move on to the second step. Am I correct procedurally there?
So it has been added to the agenda, so we've passed that hurdle. And so now we would be looking for a motion to suspend the procedural bylaw rules to allow this item to be discussed tonight.
Thank you for that. I understanding that would have came out of committee. You're absolutely correct. So if I could get a motion to suspend the procedural bylaw, I guess blowing by the 2-week vetting period or wait period to put this motion on deck, I would ask if we could do that.
So you're making that motion, and okay. Are you making the motion? Yeah, can you make the motion? You and Councillor Lowe. Okay. So Councillor Lowe's the seconder on the motion. All right, to suspend the bylaw. Okay, so now I'll turn it over to you to read your, so you've got, no, so,
I will, I'll read.
so I'll need you to read your motion. And then if you get a
Certainly.
seconder on it, right, you can speak on
Your
it.
worship, I think we have to vote on the
Oh, sorry. Right,
Yeah.
okay, so we're gonna vote on the suspension bylaw now.
Right, if we can suspend the procedural bylaw, then I can go on and read the background and the motion, Your Worship.
Okay, so voting on that. Everybody clear on what we're voting for on? All in favor? To suspend the procedural bylaw? Okay, opposed? No opposed? Okay, so that motion is carried. So
Perfect.
back to you, Councillor Norton, to read your motion, and then if you get a seconder on the motion, you can go into the background of your motion, correct? Is this the?
That's
correct.
That's correct. I can read the motion and then we can get that on
Okay.
on deck if you
All right,
would like.
yes, please.
I can answer some questions. I'll read a quick background for the benefit of the listening public here and and the balance of council. September 14th, 2023 was a difficult day for the people of St. John. Our firefighters and first responders spent countless hours at untold costs and risk dealing yet again with AIM's negligent and reckless conduct. The people of our community were subjected to toxic chemicals and fallout. What happened last week is an abomination because it was preventable. There is no reason or room for this type of negligence in the modern world, and our residents must never experience a horrific incident like that again. Out of control industrial fires are not what we want our beautiful city to make national news for or be known for. Nothing is more important right now than all three levels of government and the Port of St. John sitting at a table together and not leaving it until we come up with a solution to ensure AIM's operation is no longer. As council, we have the authority to direct our CAO to request that the Premier and the province of New Brunswick invoke its power to shut down AIM for good and never allow an organization like this to operate on our waterfront or in our city again. The motion reads, whereas American Iron and Metal, AIM, continues to prove time and time again it is not a good neighbor to the residents of St. John, and whereas the province of New Brunswick has the power not only to suspend the operations of AIM temporarily, but forever by force of legislation, and if necessary, relying on Section 33 of the Charter, the notwithstanding clause, be it resolved that council direct the CAO to request in writing and through ongoing efforts, as determined by the CAO, that the Premier and the province of New Brunswick invoke their power to shut down AIM for good and never allow an organization like this to operate on our waterfront or in our city again.
Okay, so we'll need a second on that motion, Councillor Lowe. Okay, and so we'll take any questions for Councillor Norton. I think he made it pretty clear of what. Okay, Councillor Harris, over to you.
Thank you, Worship. Thank the Councillor Norton for bringing this up. It's obviously very important and timely that we get this right. In my opinion, you know, Councillor Hickey brought a motion just over a year ago, basically requesting that the City of St. John really follow with the investigations with the WorkSafe violations and investigations that were occurring and align with the province to push for better outcomes for AIM recycling. You go back even further than that, Your Worship, and we have the person who was formerly in this chair, Mayor Don Darling, trying to push for them in a previous fire that wasn't as big. But this at this point in time, I don't think where it stands right now, I can't support this motion. And it's not for any reason other than we need to do more than just say we want it shut down. We need to do more than use our mouths to say to the province and the federal government that this is something that we need to go. We need to take action ourselves. In my opinion, and the people who voted me to be here, we need to use whatever powers the City of St. John has to deliberately take an adversarial role against anybody who would allow AIM Recycling to continue to operate at the port. There are major questions about how this even passed environmental regulations. There's major questions on what has gone into these investigations and who was considered. Obviously, the risk assessment was not done appropriately. We did not have the resources as the City of St. John to put this fire out ourselves. There was more, Chief Clifford mentioned it on the radio. It is likely that there was far more combustible material held here, which is a violation of the agreement which was put in place. And not only that, we have now no idea how many citizens are going to be impacted by the fumes that were put into the atmosphere. So I would just propose a friendly amendment, and it's literally 5 words, where Councillor Norton has said that the Premier, the province of New Brunswick, the Premier and the province of New Brunswick take action. Let's add the City of St. John. If that means pulling our board member on the Port St. John as a form of protest, I think we should consider it. If that means considering a class action lawsuit for the citizens of St. John who have been in many ways affected, and in many ways we don't know how they could be affected, I think we should consider it. If it means going up against the province and taking that adversarial role, I think we need to consider it. The Premier came out clearly today and said that an investigation will be done into how all this happened. But I want to quote CEO Estabrooks here at Port St. John. It says, since the signing of this lease with the operator of this site in 2011, many things have changed. Port St. John never envisioned the series of explosions, fires, accidents, and tragic deaths that have occurred. We are steadfast in our commitment to the health and safety of our community. I think CEO Estabrook is right, and I think it's time that the elected officials of the residents of St. John take a leadership role and put a flag in the ground and say this place has to go. So I would like to add that. Pending a seconder, we can get that friendly amendment added to Councillor Norton's. Also up to Councillor Norton whether he wants to add that in.
All right. Thank you. I will say one thing in regards to all of that is that we have no idea what the agreement is. We've never seen the lease and we've never seen the agreement. So that is part of what we're seeking as well as we go forward. Councillor Sullivan, over to you. Or sorry, Councillor Radwan, you're up next.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And I'm not sure procedurally how that works with Councillor Harris throwing that out there, but hopefully we can figure that out. I just want to first thank Councillor Norton. I think this is, it was great that you got this together, as detailed, as assertive as you did. I think it was if it was a first letter going out, this assertive might be a little different for me, but I think the last council sent like 3 letters, and so I'm kind of siding with the side of what Councillor Harris said. You know, it's great to send these letters. I think we need to be communicating with the other levels of government and working with the port as well and these sort of things. But you know what? I want to see if we can do more as well. Letters obviously hasn't worked until now. It doesn't hurt. So I'm happy to support sending a letter off. You know, I gotta say, like, to hear the conversation happening with the chief on the radio, hearing that our firefighters were standing in behind, most of them, not all of them, were standing in behind their fire trucks, hoping to protect them from the next small explosion going off. Can you just imagine the feeling of not knowing how big the next explosion is going to be out of that pile of rubble? It's terrible. 3.5 football fields by 3.5 football fields by 3 stories just seems totally unacceptable to me. I don't know what's in the regulations, so I can't speak to it, but it sounds like a massive pile that the firefighters had to fight. The people were scared. There was numerous people that had to go to hospital. It is completely unacceptable for this sort of thing to continue on in our city. And so anyway, thank you, Councillor Norton. It's great that you've brought this forward, as assertive as it is. You know, I think some people might say maybe it's too assertive, but I think it reflects exactly what the citizens feel right now. And I hope people stay upset. This can't go away. It has to be dealt with, and I am looking to take more action than this. Whatever is within our purview, you know, we're going to have to speak to General Counsel about that and see what else can happen. But I'll tell you, you know, we're not getting tax money off of this land. It's federal property, and to have the amount of time and risk to have our firefighters, police out there, not to mention the risk for the residents that live right in the backyard there. And even across the harbor. I mean, to send little kids home from school, this is completely unacceptable. So anyway, I'm happy that council is fired up about this, because it's something that we definitely should be upset about. And it's not going away. We're going to continue, I'm sure, to have these conversations. Thank you, Councillor Norton. Thank you all for stepping up with your leadership abilities, and let's see where we can take this.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sullivan, over to you.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'm normally one of those folks who, I'm normally a stay in your lane kind of guy. And I certainly understand, as we've talked about this in our community, that this is a provincially regulated operation on federally regulated and owned port land. But this is such a significant health risk, and you know, really, I think this was the proverbial straw for many people. I think so. Thank you to Councillor Norton for bringing this forward, because I think as a council, we need some focus on this, but we need the immediate reaction to show we're supporting our citizens. So, thank you to Councillor Norton. I'll certainly be supporting the motion that's before us tonight. Should also, you know, say thank you to the partners. This is what St. John does in a crisis, come together, right? St. John Fire, the Coast Guard, JDI, everybody who lent a hand to help suppress that fire. But the other piece that I know is coming from this, and I'm glad that Chair Hickey's got his hand up, because I'm sure he's going to talk about plans through the Public Safety Committee to make sure this keeps going, because that's what we need, is some ongoing focus on this. As a council, I think Councillor Norton, certainly the motion that we've got before us tonight is really important to make the point that we're upset something has to be done now, but to keep the focus on it so it doesn't wane until the next time we hear the explosions or the next fire. I'll defer that to Councillor Hickey and the work with the Public Safety Committee. I hope he highlights that when he speaks. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. I think just expediting it tonight is important as well, because it certainly demonstrates that it is not just a usual item that can go on the usual normal route. So thanks for your comments. Councillor Killen, you're up next.
Thank you, Your Worship. I want to join the team of we need to do more with this motion. We've done a lot of letters and we still end up in the same place oftentimes. It's unfortunate. It sucks. It's not a great thing to think that our partners don't want to listen to us. But I was excited to see what Premier Higgs said today. And I think that, whatever we can do as a city to enforce and embolden and support whatever it is the province is going to do and the feds are going to do is going to be helpful. So the more we can act, the more that we can say at this point in time, I think it's important to do that. So I would support more stronger language in this motion, because I don't think it is just about a letter. We can call our MLAs. Our citizens are out there calling our MLAs, or calling us, or calling the feds. They are out there. So we need to stand behind our citizens as the people who are actually trying to actually create petitions, create public engagement sessions, do all these things. Like, we represent them, so we need to match their energy. So I don't think a letter will do it. So I would be much more in favor of Councillor Harris's suggestion to add more to this, to create more of an emboldened, passionate call to action from this.
Thank you, Councillor. Deputy, over to you next.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just, I think that we can do a lot of other things. I think this is a good starting point. It's important to me that we send this off right away, because I have already spoken to a couple of my counterparts in the region, and if this goes through the region, I'm going to take it to the Regional Safety Committee, because there's people in Quispam-Sis, Rothesay, Hampton, Granby, Westfield. They're all concerned about it. It's a regional problem. There was people in Rothesay that couldn't sit outside because of this, the effect on their breathing. So, I think at this point in time, we have some, momentum. The region, is probably looking at St. John, seeing, where you're at with this. And I think if we pass this, and I think, we should pass this tonight, there's no question in my mind, and then build on it. And we can start, looking at other things to do. But I think we got to start here, and I think the region's got to get on board, and I think they definitely will if we start it off. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Deputy. Can I ask Councillor Sullivan and Councillor Killen to put your lights off if you're good? Just so everybody comes up, and Councillor Hickey can get into the number 1 spot now. Councillor Hickey, over to you.
I don't mind the number 1 spot, Your Worship.
That's where you're just gone to.
Look, I think we got to get back to what really is important here. Herb Black is not in the mood for us to dig into his problems right now. I say that tongue in cheek, of course, because that's exactly what we're going to do. I think this is an important step. I think there's a lot of conversations that will be had as they come. To Councillor Sullivan's point, I did put an item on the agenda as we approved it, separate from this, to offer an update specific to what steps we're going to be looking at from a Public Safety Committee perspective, and what our after action review will look like as well. I did want to bring up one point, though, separate from that, that I thought was interesting, that the Deputy Mayor had mentioned. And I think there's an angle here to look at this from a tax reform perspective as well. When this council talks about bearing the financial weight of industry in our city, this is exactly what we mean, right? Like, our risk profile is unique. On average, we spend somewhere around $7 million more on fire service in Fredericton or Moncton. And like, could we turn to any of those cities and say, do you have this risk profile? Has the middle of your city ever been on fire and a shelter-in-place order issued for your residents? And I don't know well, I know that question would be answered with a no. And I think the question then bears, is it fair to have is it fair to have the deal we do, and should that be reflected in our provincial taxes? So I think that's part of the conversation we have, and a good illustration of where we're coming at from a tax reform perspective, and what those implications are on municipal reform. I guess my only question, either to Councillor Norton or to whomever can answer, with the Premier's update today, this afternoon, I guess this evening really, what's the strategy now? Because this letter would address a lot of those things that were committed to in the Premier's response. So I just wonder what changes. Is it the addition of Councillor Harris's amendment? Is it further steps along that way? Just a friendly question.
Councillor Norton, back to you.
Your worship, that's gonna have to be up to Councillor Hickey to answer. I would caution council. In fact, I won't be supporting any friendly amendment to this. This motion has been carefully drafted, carefully worded. It will stand as is. If Councillor Harris wants to add an additional motion, which goes outside our legal authority to add the City of St. John, let me remind folks, the City of St. John has no authority to pull a permit, issue a fine, direct a stop work order with the operation of AIM. We can, however, exercise our voice. This motion is merely capturing the collective voice of our community. If the motion dies on the table, it dies on the table. If Councillor Harris and Councillor Killen would like together co-sponsor a motion afterwards, and what I heard Councillor Harris say was exactly all the things that this motion does. Let me remind you that our authority as it relates to this operation is merely to exercise our voice. This motion is stronger than previous motions that have been written, but it is no different than when the people of St. John voice their opinion to their MLAs to shut down the business. That's exactly what we're doing by way of this motion, and we've heard the deputy say that he's able to carry this on to a regional level. The only power that this municipality has is to cause our only employee, that being the chief administrative officer, to express our collective community desire to those that hold the power to employ any mechanism possible to hold AIM responsible. And that's exactly what this motion directs our city manager to do. It does remind the province of some of the tools that it can avail itself of, some of the mechanisms that it can avail itself of to hold AIM responsible and take action. So I would ask for support. Those that feel like they can't support the motion, you can certainly feel free to vote how you see fit. But I hope what I've said give some context and some explanation as to the importance of that. Councillor Hickey mentions a 5:30 release by our Premier. That's great. I applaud his efforts, and I think that's positive. And this motion takes nothing away from that. And if anything, it adds to that, and it certainly sends a message that we're in good alignment with our province. So we're singing from the same song sheet, is what I would say, and I think that the Premier himself would be happy to see a motion that echoes exactly what he's expressed. But by no means would I see that as any type of reason or any type of cause to vote against a motion that captures well not only our legal relationship to the operation that's there, but also certainly broadcast loud and clear what our community is asking for us to reflect in a motion. So thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm going to go to Councillor Ogden because I don't think you've had a chance to speak yet. Have you, Councillor? This is just the first for you. Round one?
Yeah, and it's only my second time the whole night, so.
Okay, you're up then.
It does get a little lonely sometimes when you're just sitting there listening, but anyway, one thing I hope that it does is that it educates the rest of the province on the value of St. John. Sometimes I feel that we are undervalued, and because we generate the tax dollars that keeps so many other things going, and we've been doing it for 60 years. And sometimes I feel that when we speak up about our poverty or the conditions of our roads because of the heavy industry or the consequences of living next door to something like AIM, people say, well, that's just St. John. But the consequences of that industry is it's built hundreds of schools in the province. We've only had one in 60 years. But it's what David Hickey was saying, and is something that I taught all my life and have spoken about, is that I don't think the rest of the province values St. John in the sense that what we have to live with and the extra costs we have. Like, for instance, how many firefighters in Fredericton or Moncton would have to cower behind a fire truck because the fire truck could blow up because the regulations were broken on how big the field, or 3 football fields, and what did we say, 3 stories high. Where were the regulations and all those types of things that this put the people of St. John in peril? And so I hope the rest of the province starts to learn the value of St. John, and that when we speak up about our issues, that they will take us serious, from our roads to, firemen cowering behind fire trucks. That's unheard of in the rest of New Brunswick, and I hope that they start to value St. John and think a little more highly of us, what we have to live with. And this is an extreme example, but we shouldn't have to live like this. This should not be this way. This is not healthy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Before we start round 2, I'll say that just remember that St. John, we're in an advocating position because we don't own the property, we don't put out the operating, we don't license, so we're more in an advocating position. I have had the opportunity this weekend to speak to the Premier twice about this. He did tell me today that they would be putting out a release, and that he was looking to do with the task force. So I think that this motion of Councillor Norton's does align well with that. I also appreciated the release by the Port CEO, Craig Bell Estabrook. So I would like to see this motion pass. I think it's just another, it's another power move for us as in the advocating position. And we do need to work together. We will be part of that task force, I will assume, and and if not, I will certainly be advocating for that, because there are 4 partners in this. There's the feds, there's the province, there's the port, and there's us, and we're all in this together. And so we need to make sure that this moves forward, and I think we can do it, but I think we all need to do it together. So Councillor Harris, I'll go back to you, and then Councillor Radwan.
Can't support it, Your Worship. This is weak. This is completely weak as it's written. If we do not bring all the city of St. John has to bear to this, and the idea that all we can do is advocate is not even founded in any fact. We can pull our board member off Port St. John if they continue to support AIM's lease in their land, on federal land. We can pull our board member. We appoint him. We can pull him. If we are not going to be let me finish, Your Worship, please.
Yep, no,
if we're not
listen,
going to, if
Counselor,
we are
can I
not
just-
going to continue,
Counselor, what I wanted to remind you of is one, this is my meeting and I'm the chair, and I will let you finish, but by the same token, I wanted to let you know that we can pull our board member. We can actually do that. That's not going to solve this issue for us, but you're right, we can. So continue, please.
thank you for acknowledging that we can do something beyond what is written in this motion. Beyond that, we have all kinds of other powers we can pursue. We can get creative with how we engage in the province. This city is capable of getting up and walking away from a discussion until the federal government and the provincial government exercise what the citizens of St. John want to see done. We're all in agreement here that the citizens of St. John want this shut down. But as it's written right now, it's basically saying, let the city of St. John play a talking role and not a walking role. And until this is written in such a way that it takes a walking role and actually walks the talk, I can't support it. We've seen too many letters written to the province that come back empty. We didn't even have a response to Councillor Hickey's motion a year ago when somebody died at this facility. And let me remind the members of this council, nobody died in this accident. Nobody died. When we did have somebody die, who came and talked to us? No one. Where was the CEO? Nowhere to be found. Where was the port to be commenting on it? Nowhere to be found. It disappeared like a fart in the wind, and it's not acceptable. And until we see something, until we see the city actually take action with what we can do and start imagining the art of the possible, I can't support it. And none of the people who voted for me to be here can support it either, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you. What I will say to that is,
we did have a seconder of my motion, by the way, so let's put it to a vote.
Okay, let's put it to a vote. We have nothing to lose with Councillor Norton's motion. You have a seconder on your motion, on your friendly amendment? I have to check with the, I have to check with
Your
the
Worship. Yeah,
clerk.
I believe, Your Worship, I would have to agree to the amendment for that to take place.
Okay, so I'll ask you, Councillor Norton, to agree to the friendly amendment?
That's not procedurally true, according to the clerk. We don't need a seconder.
Excuse me, I'm trying to run this meeting one voice at a time. Clerk, I'll get you then to clarify what the process and procedure is for this, to add this friendly amendment on. Can you please do that?
Yes. So technically, there is no such thing as a friendly amendment. Procedurally, there are amendments. And so in this case, Councillor Norton has suggested he's not entertaining any friendly amendments. So Councillor Harris is correct in that it's appropriate now to vote on the amendment. But I just wanted to ensure that we had a vote or a mover and a seconder already on the main motion, which was Councillor Norton's. I assume Councillor Norton moved it. Did he get a seconder?
Yes, he got Councillor Lowe.
Perfect. Okay, so now that Councillor Harris has proposed an amendment, and I believe he had a seconder, then now it's appropriate to vote on the amendment on its own.
Okay, so we're going to
If the
vote.
amendment passes, then you would vote on the main motion with the amendment added. And if the amendment fails, then you'd go back to voting on the main motion, which was Councillor Norton's.
Okay, so is there any numbers for the amendment? Is it just a pass? It's 6.
It's a majority vote,
okay.
yeah.
All right, so I can put the amendment on the floor now because I have Councillor Harris who's put the amendment forward and Councillor Killen who's seconding the amendment. Is that correct, Councillor? Okay, so the amendment is on the floor and
Sorry, Your Worship, there's I'm not sure if you can see, I'm just jumping into flag that there are still a couple of hands up for your awareness.
All right, so I have 2 motions on the floor, correct, City Clerk?
That's correct. So you have
perfect.
the main motion, and then you have an amendment that's been moved and seconded.
And
so
that
now we
will have
vote
to
on
be
the amendment.
voted on first. Okay. Councillor Radwan and then Councillor Hickey, and then we'll do the vote for the first one. Councillor Radwan, over to you.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. So, I mean, I did want to, I think that Councillor Harris's amendment to this motion is great. And the reason why is I do think for us to sit back and think that we can't do anything is probably not a good way to think. We haven't gotten our CAO and staff to explore what we could possibly do. I will remind council that I think that one of the things that council might be able to do, and I mean, it's up to staff to come back with recommendations, so I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but we have it in our purview to make bylaws. And within those bylaws, we sometimes are able to find people. So anyway, I would love to see what ability we have, you know, and if staff comes back with no recommendations, then that's fine too. But we haven't explored that as a council yet. You know, I'd also like to see a big bill go to AIM to look after fire service. So there's many things that I think that staff could be exploring, and I definitely want to do that. So I will be supporting the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor. I will remind you that you cannot make bylaws on federal property, and there will definitely be a bill going to the to AIM for that. Councillor Hickey, over to you.
Thanks, Your Worship. I would like clarification on what the actual amendment is. And okay. Second, I guess my only thought is I did like your idea because I think it adds a bit to the letter potentially, Your Worship, which was your suggestion of inclusion in the task force. I don't know if there was room within the motion as it's written to include that. Hopefully it could.
Okay, sounds good. I don't think we need that personally because I spoke to the Premier today.
Oh, okay, good.
But that's fine.
Great. And I guess all I would suggest is that I'm not necessarily supportive of the amendment, largely because it seems, based on the statement released today, Craig Esterbrooks at the port is in lockstep with our strategy out of City Hall in condemning AIM's actions and wanting to see resolution, specifically a resolution that sees their operation change from that site or dramatically shift at that site. And I think it ultimately means making sure it closes its doors. I see that, and I wouldn't be prepared to lose the city's voice at that table of what is becoming the focal point of economic development in this community. I don't want to lose my voice at that table over this one, which we seem to be in agreement on.
Thank you, Councillor. And the other thing is we have the support of the port, and you have the support of the Premier. So you're right. We don't want to lose our voice with the port. Deputy, over to you.
Thank you, Worship. Look, I don't think we need to change anything. I think we need to get the original motion off the table. I think we spent way too much time talking about this. This is an urgent matter. This is step one. This doesn't prevent any other action from being taken. And I think we need to get on with it. And I'm not supporting any change to it. I want that original motion. I want it to go through, and I want to move it on to a regional level. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you. All right. So the amendment is on the floor, and I'll call the question.
Your Worship, somebody did ask for clarification on what was written.
Oh, right. Councillor Hickey did. Sorry. So back to you.
I wrote it in the chat log, but in case you wanted to hear it again. Yes. All we're doing is adding the city of St. John to the section that talks about usage of power to see it shut down. Councillor Norton's motion only includes the province, the Premier, and I believe the port. It doesn't include the city of St. John using whatever means necessary to ensure this plant is shut down.
Thank you.
So that's what I'm adding for clarity's sake.
Good. So you've heard what the councillor is proposing. I will call the question. All in favor of the amendment? Opposed? Okay, so I have Councillor, I have the deputy, I have Councillor Stewart, Councillor Lowe, Councillor Ogden, Councillor Hickey, Councillor Sullivan. Opposed? So motion fails. So I'm going to go back to the original motion that we have on the floor, Councillor Norton's motion. I'm going to call the question on that. All in favor? And opposed? Okay, so I have Councillor Killen, Councillor Harris, and Councillor Radwan opposed. Motion passes. Okay, thank you. Next item, City Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Next on the agenda is an update from Public Safety, Councillor Hickey, item 16.3.
Over to you, Councillor Hickey.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. Apologies to Councillor McKenzie, who just said we spent a lot of time talking about this, but I'm gonna mention it again because I wanted to offer a brief update and kind of strategy as to how public safety is going to be looking at the AIM fire, looking at our EMO activation, and get an understanding of exactly what moving forward we're going to be doing. And I also wanted to reiterate our commitment in calling on the provincial government to end AIM's operating license on St. John's waterfront. I think it's important to note that this is not a new call to action, as we just discussed, from this council. In just July of last year, this council did pass a motion that called on the provincial government to fully review their operating license in the wake of a second workplace death at the facility. It's in my opinion that should have been enough. The countless explosions, fires, and community impact from this facility should have also been enough. So we are once again renewing our call to action for the Port of St. John, the provincial government, the federal government before another incident like this or worse inevitably happens on this site. Residents and businesses deserve respect. In the wake of lost wages, closed shops, closed offices, and closed windows, they deserve answers and, I think, clear outcomes as to what comes next. Status quo at AIM is bad for St. Johners, and I think what we established from our last conversation, bad for business. Our EMO, our emergency management organization, faced 2 unique public safety activations from Thursday through Saturday between the fire at American Iron and Metal and Hurricane Lee. I want to extend sincere thank you to our fire service as well, their leader, Chief Kevin Clifford, our emergency managers, our city staff, our community stakeholders, businesses, and businesses that stepped up during these times to both support our efforts and support the community as a whole too. But also to residents. It was a tough time at the end of last week to be in St. John, and I think that's reflected in the conversation we've had tonight, and also the conversation that's been had in the community. I would say this has done the fire at AIM, the incident at AIM, and the fire at AIM has done a great job of uniting St. Johners around a common goal, and that's to see significant changes on this site. It's to see suspended operating licenses, and it's hopefully ultimately to see removal of them in that space. I also want to offer everyone, after a significant event like this, a safety assessment will be done in order to assess our performance and also understand how we can improve our emergency and crisis response and communication. This will work through the Public Safety Committee structure with significant priority. We will work through this process efficiently, effectively, and we'll continue to push for provincial and federal leadership in order to protect public safety in this community. Throughout this process, I'm reminded of a quote from the former mayor of Mississauga, Hazel McCallion, who would say, "The federal government has all the money, the provincial government has all the power, and the municipal government has all the problems." So today, united, we face once again another problem in this community, asking for answers from our other levels of government. Our process, our EMO measures, I think did a great job in coming together. As I said, we'll make sure those will be fulsome reviews in the coming weeks and months. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hickey. I will just pile on one little tidbit to that after any major incident, the city would do an after-action review, and what part of the reason for that is that when you adjust the playbook as you go forward, so there'll be an after-action review for the storm. So there always is, and things change over time. So there will be an after-action review. We'll look at all this. Now, we haven't had an incident like that, and we hope not to have another one. But appreciate your update. I guess Councillor Redwan has a question on the update. Councillor?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I was just curious, was that whole thing from Uptown St. John, or Did Councillor Hickey add anything to it?
No, that's not from Uptown St. John.
Oh,
That's
no,
another item.
that's specific to a public safety committee, me being the chair's update. We felt it prudent, given the timeliness of this. We've had some schedule changes with when our committee will be held. Because of it, I just wanted to offer an update as chair of the public safety committee. There is an Uptown St. John letter that I had attached to the agenda when we had approved it. I believe it is item 16.3 immediately following this one.
Okay. No, that's good to know, because it's always good for the public to be able to see what's happening and be able to go and look at it for themselves. So thank you.
Thank you. So I'll need a receive for information. Motion from Councillor Ogden and the deputy on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item, City Clerk.
Next is item 16.4, and this was the item that was added to the agenda, a letter from Uptown St. John with respect to AIM.
Okay, so that has been, City Clerk, do we need that read out on most letters that are sent to us we receive for information, or what will we do with that, where it came in at the last second?
Well, it automatically gets added as an addendum to the public records tomorrow.
Right. Okay.
So
it'll be there
anyway.
anyway.
If you'd like, Mayor. Yeah, it will be part of the public record on Tuesday.
Tuesday. Okay, that's perfect. So maybe we should get it read out. Councillor Hickey, do you want to read it for us so that all of council can then vote on that for receive for information?
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
As their rep?
As your representative at the BIA, yes.
Okay.
Dated September 18th, today's date, Your Worship of Common Council, Uptown St. John is a business improvement association that supports local business. It is with great frustration and concern that the American Iron and Metal fire that recently took place on September 14th, 2023 affected many of our residents and local businesses. Uptown St. John Inc. represents over 500 plus businesses, of which many had to shut down their operations for the day. This cost to our local economy has huge impacts on the business and property owners. The safety of our business owners, residents, and visitors to Uptown St. John was significantly compromised with unknown ongoing effects. Uptown St. John echoes Mayor Node Reardon's statement and that of St. John Common Council to hold all parties accountable and to provide respect and protection. Regards, Krista Wetmore, Uptown St. John Inc. President.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I get a motion to receive for information? The deputy and Councillor Hickey on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item, City Clerk.
Yes, now we have items from Committee of the Whole. So the first one's 17.1, and that was the Building Safer Community Fund Amendment Agreement. And I can read the resolution out for this.
Yes, please.
It's that the city enter into a contribution agreement, amendment number 1, with Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness, generally in the form as presented to Committee of the Whole at its meeting held on September 18th, 2023, for the receipt of $972,992 from Building Safer Community Fund, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the said agreement, amending number 1, and any other documents ancillary thereto.
Thank you. I'll take a mover and a seconder on that, please. I've got the deputy and Councillor Ogden on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item, City Clerk.
And the final item from Committee of the Whole, it's a release of positive covenant at 279 Duke Street. The resolution is that the city release the encumbrance recorded on the Certificate of Registered Ownership for PID number 363374 as restrictive covenant, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the discharge of restricted covenant generally in the form as presented to Committee of the Whole at its meeting held September 18th, 2023, and any other documents necessary to effect the release.
Okay, I'll take a mover and a seconder, Councillor Lowe and Councillor Stewart on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, is that council? That's it, City Clerk. Councillor Lowe, over to you. Motion to adjourn. And the deputy. Thank you, Counselor. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate everyone being here. Thanks, staff. It was a busy